Well, let's try something yourself. Let's try changing your strings. If you've never changed your strings before, then watch this demonstration, and you can certainly try this on your own. I would, however, advise you to get someone who's changed your strings before to do it with you the first time, because it really is a little bit of a complicated procedure. There's not much danger that you're going to damage your instrument or that you're going to break anything, but you may find yourself with your strings off, not able to get strings back on, and will need someone to help you put those back on. But if you can learn to change your strings and retune your guitar yourself, you can save yourself a lot of money rather than paying somebody $20, $25 to do it, just to put on a $5 to $10 set of strings. So let's look at what you do. The first question is, how often should you change your strings? People ask that all the time. Well, that varies, of course, depending on the quality of strings, the amount of playing you do, and how often the strings lose their tune. A good rule of thumb would be if you're playing in our beginning guitar course at the recommended amount of time, about 5 days a week, you probably want to change your strings about every 4 to 6 weeks. If you play more than that, if you find yourself playing an hour or two a day, and you're playing almost every day, you may find that you need to change those strings about every 2 weeks or about every 10 days to really get a good sound. But the signs that you need to change your strings, first of all, are that the strings will get a dull looking finish to them. You might even rub the strings and find that you get sort of an oxidation or sort of a dirtiness off on your fingers. Your strings will also start to have sort of a dull, thumpy sound. You might be able to hear this. That's an old string. Here's a new string I've already put on. Don't know if you can tell the difference, but that's a bright, clear sound. Has more treble to it, whereas the old one has a muted, thumpy sound. As your strings get older, you'll find that you tune your guitar, and then it doesn't take very long for your guitar to get out of tune. That's because those strings are old, and they just then get very stretchy, and they don't hold their tension like they should. So when you determine it's time to change your strings, you're going to need a few tools. First tool is a little $2 tool called a string winder. It's really worth getting one of these because they're handy for several things, mostly for saving your wrist and your hands as you wind your strings on and off. It increases the speed with which you can change your strings as well because you'll be able to wind quickly. You also want a pair of wire cutters. Something that has just a pair of wire cutters inside of it would be great. These are actually not that good, but something that can cut typical metal wire would work just fine. Of course, you'll need a set of strings, and you'll get 6 strings in a package. You might want to start with just an inexpensive house brand. Start with a light or an extra light version so that you can play your guitar and just not have to press down that hard as a beginner. And you might start with just some inexpensive house strings, either from your local music store or some that we have on our Guitar Masters web store. You can also start experimenting with different makers and brands, and eventually you'll find one that fits your guitar. Now, if your guitar maker makes a brand of strings, such as Martin or Taylor or Yamaha, I would say go ahead and go with the strings that are made for your brand of guitar. Sometimes those do have a better sound for your particular guitar, but that's only some of the more high-end makers that actually make strings themselves. Also, you want a cloth or two that you can use. It needs to be a soft cloth. Something like this is great for polishing your instrument, or just even a cotton cloth where all the excess cotton has been washed out so that it won't be shedding on your instrument. Something to clean with. I've got a couple little jars here. One is a cleaner and one is a polish. You can buy guitar polish in a spray bottle or in a bottle like this, and it's just to clean up your guitar and to polish it. And that's a good thing to do while you have all your strings off, because dust and just grime tends to collect a little bit under the fretboard or on the fretboard under the strings, and then also under the bridge. And it's just a good time. Your guitar also gets a lot of oil from your hands on it over time, and that needs to be cleaned off regularly so that the finish and the wood itself is protected. Okay, let's change a string. I've already changed string 6 today, so let's change string 5. I'll just show you how to do 1. Take your string winder, place it on the tuning peg, and begin to wind it until that string becomes nice and loose, like a rubber band. And then just wind and wind until there's enough tension off of that you can actually just unwind it around the post up top. And you want to undo the tail and pull that string out of the post altogether. Now, on your string winder, there is a small slot that is great for pulling the peg out of the bridge. So using this slot like a lever, stick it under the peg, and then you can just pull that peg up very easily. Peg is about 1.5 inches long, and when it comes out, the string will just pull directly out of the hole. The string has a nut on the end. The peg has a groove down the center to hold that string, and we'll show you more about that as we put a string back on, but just set that aside. And then it's really important that you wind that string up and throw it away immediately. Keep a trash can nearby, because guitar strings are infamous for messing up vacuum cleaners, especially the little pieces you clip off when you're cleaning up the excess from the tail. So get that wound up. You don't need it. There's really no use for an old guitar string, and just throw it in a trash can and get rid of it immediately. Okay, now that you've got that off, take a little bit of your polish and your rag and just polish underneath the bridge. Clean up all the dust. Spend a little bit of time caring for your instrument. There are also some oils that are available that are good for rubbing on the fretboard and that return some of the natural oils into the wood. And once you've done a little cleanup job, we can then put the string on. Take your strings and you need to lay them out and be sure that you know which strings are which. Often it's easy to see that by the thickness of the strings themselves, but sometimes you'll need to read the numbers to show you the diameter or the thickness of the string and make sure you've got them lined up numerically. Many times I've changed it wrong, especially strings 1 and 2 look very similar, or strings 3 and 4 look very similar. And I've gotten the wrong one on there. And as soon as you put the wrong one on there and made a bend in the wrong place, that string really can't be moved to another peg or to another hole because it's now got a weakness in it. And essentially you've lost that whole set of strings. So make absolutely sure you've got the right string. And we're going to be changing string 5, so I've got that one here. I'm going to open that package up. And the strings often come wound. Sometimes they come packaged straight. They often come wound and they easily pop out and are nice and straight. Again, we have a nut on the end of the string, and that nut is going to go down into the hole of the guitar. So place it right down inside that hole, and then take your peg and place the peg in the hole with the groove facing up the neck of the guitar. And that groove is going to be where the string fits right into. And then if you pull it, that nut hits the bottom of the peg, and you can push it down, and that's what actually holds the string into the guitar. Push that peg down into there, get a little bit of tension, and then pull the string right up here. Now it's important that you put the string onto the post in such a way that the string will be winding to the inside of the post whenever you wind it on. Notice these strings that are already on. See how this one comes around the inside of the post? And then over here on this side, these strings come to the inside of the post. If the strings are coming to the inside of the post, your tuning keys are going to turn in the proper direction when you need to tune it, sharpen or flatten that string. So I find one of the holes in the post, and I run the string through that. And now I've got to figure out just how much slack to leave. If I leave too much slack, I'm going to have a big ball of string around this little tiny post. If I pull it too tight and don't leave enough slack, I'm not going to be able to get enough winds around the post to hold the string in place. Here's what I figured out. You need about 4 to 5 inches of slack to have just about the right number of winds. And I found with my hand, I can just open my 4 fingers like that, and from the pinky to the first finger, that gives me about the right amount of string. So I get that about where it ought to be. And then up here at the post, I take the tail and I just bend it to make a marker right there. Now I've got the right amount of string, and I can just then begin to wind. I pull it down and I let the string sit in its notch, and I hold it on with one thumb. Now this is where things get a little tricky. You just have to come up with a way that works for you. Putting your string winder on here, You begin to wind it in the direction that brings the string around the inside of the post, and I've got it going that way. And as it goes around, you have to play with it a little bit. Make sure the tail goes on top of the wind so that it holds it on. Can't pop off now. And then I just keep going around and around. And each time I make a new wind, I like to get it going below the one I just created. So it's a nice, neat, wound set of strings. So I go around, I've been around twice now. Continue going around 3 times. And there we are, just at about 3 to 4 times, I begin to feel some of the tightness on the string, and those winds begin to fill up the post. There we go. Now, I wind that just enough to hear the string make a note. Don't want to wind it much more beyond it making a note, because it's easy to wind the string too much to get it too tight and to actually break the string. You don't want to do that just by winding it. So you stop when you hear a note, and then you just kind of pull that string, pull a little bit of that tension out, and now it's nice and loose again. Continue winding. Okay, it's making a note. Now what I would do is find that note. This is string 5, which is an A, and I'd have to find an A note to get that in the right ballpark. You can do that by putting on your chord drill CD, and starting with track 41, you can play the notes E, A, D, G, B, and E, and listen to them and get the string close so that your tuner can then be used. So there's an A. I've got my string now tuned close to an A. I want to pull it a couple more times, because what I'm trying to do is get out as much slack as I possibly can remove so that the guitar holds its tune more than it loses its tune. Things like humidity in the air, the temperature of the air, those do affect the strings itself. And for the first couple of days, you'll find that you need to tune maybe a little more often than you normally do. After playing, you might find that your guitar goes out of tune. But now you're at the place where you can use your tuner. So that's how you change a guitar string. I would encourage you to try that, and try it with someone who can help you know how to do that. And you may have to pay someone at a music store to help you the first time, but it's well worth the training to be able to get it yourself, because then you can consistently, confidently change your strings and always have a guitar that sounds as good as it possibly can. And thanks so much, and I hope that you'll be successful at changing your strings.